Hey, everybody. It is Wednesday, January 28th, 2026. Major update about what's going on with Iran. Obviously, the big question on everyone's mind is when and if the U.S. is going to attack. We've talked about the massive military assets that the United States is accumulating in the region around Iran, the movement of the major U.S. aircraft carrier, the Abraham Lincoln, right up near Iran, seeming like preparing for an attack. And at the same time, the Iranians have been openly saying that if the U.S. attacks them, they will retaliate by attacking Israel. So let's take a look now at let's take a look now at Prime Minister Netanyahu's response in a press conference just yesterday about what will happen if the Iranians attack the Israelis. Have a look at this.
מה שהוא יחליט, מדינת ישראל תחליט את מה שאנחנו נחליט. ואני רוצה להגיד לך שאנחנו עוקבים אחרי מה שמתרחש, ואם מותר לי להשתמש בניסוח שאני מעת לעת משתמש בו, אנחנו ערוכים לכל תרחיש. אבל אמרתי כאן את הדבר העיקרי. אם איראן תעשה את הטעות ותתקוף אותנו, היא תזכה לתגובה שהיא אפילו לא מדמיינת.
Wow, there you have it. If Iran makes the mistake of attacking Israel, they will get a response that they cannot even imagine. Prime Minister Netanyahu's words. So let's put this into the context of what's going on here. Because Iran has made this threat that they'll attack Israel if the U.S. attacks, this means that the decision to attack Iran by the United States is obviously also an Israeli issue. And there has to be a lot of working together on what to do, because Israelis are not just going to sit here and be sitting ducks and let the Iranians unleash their ballistic missiles at us. And that's why at the very beginning of that statement, Prime Minister Netanyahu said, look, Trump's going to do what he's going to do, but we're going to do what we're going to do, meaning we have our own decision-making to make for our own national security. Does that mean something preemptive? Who knows what that means? But he then, of course, added that they will have a response they could not even imagine. So in the context of the thinking, the strategic thinking of what's going on in the minds of the mullahs in Tehran, think of it this way. During the 12-day war between Israel and Iran back in June, on the first day of it, the Israelis opened up an air corridor, meaning they opened up the skies and gained control of the airspace over the entire region and, of course, over Iran. They had already destroyed the Syrian air defenses earlier after the Assad regime fell. Iraq doesn't really have air defenses. And then there was the Iranian air defenses that they destroyed early on. And ever since then, the Israelis have maintained that air superiority over the entire region. So Israel kind of has freedom of operation. So if the Iranians were to choose to do anything against Israel, Israel has no problem. It's not just an empty threat. Israel has no problem going in there and carrying out precision airstrikes that could be absolutely devastating to the Iranians. So why would they do it? Why would the Iranians want to drag Israel into the conflict? No, they know Israel's capabilities. They suffered those capabilities last June. Why would they drag Israel into the conflict? Well, they would only do it if they really feel that the regime is about to fall. They would also, it's also a good move in the Muslim world because there's so much Jew hatred in the Muslim world. By attacking Israel, they could garner more support for the regime from Muslim nations. Okay, that would be part of their calculation. But basically, attacking Israel would be a desperation move, which would signal that the regime knows that it's about to collapse. Because if they just want to kind of stave off the American attacks and kind of weather the storm and remain intact as a regime, they're not going to attack Israel. It does not serve their purposes. So that's what to watch for in that area. Now, in terms of the calculus of the United States and Israel vis-a-vis Iran, so Ambassador Huckabee, the U.S. ambassador to Israel, yesterday speaking at a major conference that took place in Jerusalem, had this to say about the U.S.-Israel relationship vis-a-vis Iran. Have a look.
Israel does more for the United States than most Americans will ever understand. And one thing we must remind people, every enemy of Israel is an enemy of the United States. You indeed are the appetizer But we have always been the entree. For 47 years, Iran has always in the same sentence said, death to Israel and death to America. It is the American flag they put on their buildings and cause their people to march over and stomp on going in to let America know how much they hate us. Well, we need to be very clear that our partnership with Israel is to our benefit. Our abandonment of Israel, our acting like we don't want to be a partner to Israel, is to our ever-loving detriment, and it is only opening a door to these crazed people, not the people themselves, but the leadership, the regime of Iran, that for 47 years has taunted, tortured, and done more to sponsor the horrific things that have killed more Americans than any other group on the entire planet.
Okay, this is a very important statement, especially because of some of the talk on the American right that you see about Iran, where you have people like Tucker Carlson saying, well, the Iranians have never killed any Americans, which is ridiculous. There was the Marine barracks bombing done by the Iranians back in the 1980s that killed over 250 U.S. servicemen. But that's just here in the Middle East, and there's other examples of Iranian-backed militias attacking Americans. But more importantly, you look at what happened in Venezuela and how President Trump is trying to shut down the drug trade and the human trafficking trade that is killing Americans, right? All the fentanyl pouring into the United States. What a lot of Americans don't realize is that the Venezuelan Maduro and before him Chavez regime was basically one regime with the Iranian regime. They're very closely interconnected. Not just like an alliance between two countries, but much more than that. Their financial systems were intertwined. When Venezuela needed more oil and wasn't producing enough and had a bit of an energy crisis a few years ago, the Iranians sent over a few of their tankers. There are Iranian operatives embedded in the Venezuelan government. The leaders in the Iranian regime own homes in Venezuela that they've always seen as a safe haven if they ever had to run when the regime would fall. Lots of cooperation between Venezuela and Iran. And Hezbollah operates in Venezuela. They have training bases there. And their drug trafficking trade, which starts in the Middle East but goes all the way to the United States, is the source of the drugs that come into the United States and kill Americans. So you can't disentangle American interests fighting the drug trade and fighting the drugs coming across the southern border from the enemy in Iran. It's all one thing. So Ambassador Huckabee is absolutely right that Iran is a direct threat to Americans and kills Americans. And from the Iranians' perspective, America and Israel is one enemy. And that's why it makes sense to them that if America attacks them, they're going to retaliate by attacking Israel. They see us as the same. So despite what all the naysayers say, from a realpolitik standpoint, from a strategic standpoint, one has to view dealing with Iran in the context of the U.S.-Israel relationship. There's no way around that. Now, that said, another issue that Prime Minister Netanyahu raised in his press conference was the issue of Saudi Arabia. And the Saudis have been pivoting towards Qatar and Turkey. And this is after years of taking greater and greater steps towards reconciliation with Israel. In recent months, the Saudis have completely turned on the Abraham Accords countries that they used to be closely aligned with. They've turned on the UAE. They're now in open hostility with the UAE. And they're talking about how they don't want any normalization with Israel. And they're getting cozier with the Iranians, with the Qataris, with the Turks. So the Saudis seem to be changing sides. We have to stop thinking about the Saudis as a more moderate country. And Prime Minister Netanyahu took a swipe at them where he said in his press conference, he said, "We expect from anybody who wants normalization or peace with us that they not participate in efforts steered by forces or ideologies that want the opposite of peace." And he's talking about that increasing Saudi partnership with the Qataris and the Turks. So, Saudi Arabia seems to be making some bad choices. Now, another reason they're doing that, and this is why it's connected to this Iran update, is that the Saudis do not want the Iranian regime to fall. Now, that might seem strange to you because the Saudis and Iranians have a history of terrible relations. They even have had open warfare with each other over the years. So why would the Saudis be trying to protect the Iranian regime from falling? I made a video about this on the Israel 365 YouTube channel last week. It might be worthwhile going and watching it. But just to summarize the key points, the Saudis need the Iranian regime to continue to exist, because if the Iranian regime falls and Iran becomes a pro-Western democratic state, the Saudis lose leverage and they lose importance in the region. They actually need to be the power player that they've always been, where sometimes they're on the Chinese side, sometimes they're on the American side, and the Americans need them because they're kind of moderate and they have a lot of oil and they have this massive landmass in terms of global shipping. And so the Saudis have this strategic importance. But if the Iranian regime falls, the Iranian landmass is so large and is the only rival large nation in the Middle East, and it's also a massive oil producing nation, then if Iran becomes a Western ally, Saudi Arabia becomes less important. If Iran becomes democratic, then the largest country in the region becoming a democracy and rejecting Islam, that could spill over into Saudi Arabia, which has a very oppressed population. Saudi Arabia is not a free country. And the last thing the Saudis want is a kind of Arab Spring where people want democracy because democracy has taken over a neighboring country. And they certainly don't want a pro-Western, free, democratic Iran keeping oil prices low and disrupting their only source of income, because Saudi Arabia doesn't really have an economy beyond oil. All of this provides context for a statement made by Reza Pahlavi, the Crown Prince of Iran, who is talking about what a post-regime Iran could look like. Keep in mind the impact that it could have, the negative impact it could have on the Saudi Arabian Islamic regime if this were to happen. So here's Reza Pahlavi just the other day.
To all of our friends around the world, under the yoke of the Islamic Republic, Iran is identified in your minds with terrorism, extremism, and poverty. The real Iran is a different Iran, a beautiful, peace-loving, and flourishing Iran. It is the Iran that existed before the Islamic Republic, and it is the Iran that will rise again from its ashes the day the Islamic Republic falls. So let me be clear about how a free Iran will act towards its neighbors and the world after the fall of this regime. In security and foreign policy, Iran's nuclear military program will end. Support for terrorist groups will cease immediately. A free Iran will work with regional and global partners to confront terrorism, organized crime, drug trafficking, and extremist Islamism. Iran will act as a friend and a stabilizing force in the region, and it will be a responsible partner in global security. In diplomacy, relations with the United States will be normalized, and our friendship with America and her people will be restored. The state of Israel will be recognized immediately. We will pursue the expansion of the Abraham Accords into the Cyrus Accords, bringing together a free Iran, Israel, and the Arab world. A new chapter will begin, grounded in mutual recognition, sovereignty, and national interest. In energy, Iran holds some of the largest oil and gas reserves in the world. A free Iran will become a reliable energy supplier to the free world. Policymaking will be transparent. Iran's actions will be responsible. Prices will be predictable. In transparency and governance.
So think about the points that Reza Pahlavi just made in light of everything that I was just saying. Keeping oil prices low, having a pro-Western democracy, having a free people that is no longer Islamic, suddenly makes them so much more attractive, because the landmass of Iran and the population size of Iran, they are the biggest country in the region. If you add up Lebanon, Jordan, Iraq, Syria, Israel, all together, and Saudi Arabia, the population does not come close to the Iranian population. The landmass, Saudi Arabia's got a big landmass. Those other countries all together are not equal to the size of Iran. If Iran becomes a pro-Western democracy, it undermines the importance, the strategic value of Saudi Arabia goes down to almost zero because the West doesn't need them anymore. You have this pro-Western, massive oil-producing democracy that is a reliable ally in the region. Why should they bother playing these games with Saudi Arabia? Saudi Arabia is constantly switching sides, and the fact that the Americans and the West needs a reliable ally in governing a large oil-producing country in the region is such a necessity for the West. So Saudi Arabia has all this leverage. They lose all that leverage immediately if the Iranian regime falls. So that's why Saudi Arabia is now aligning itself with those forces that are trying to preserve the Iranian regime and are pivoting against the West. They're making a huge mistake, because if the Iranian regime does fall and everything gets realigned in the Middle East with Israel's rising power, the Saudi kingdom might end up on the wrong side of the entire Middle East. So this is a situation very much worth watching. It's a sidebar to the whole question of the Iranian regime falling, is the impact it has on Saudi Arabia. But it's important to understand it so that we can properly interpret the behavior and the statements coming out of the Saudi Islamic kingdom down there in Riyadh. All right, folks, that's it for the update today. If you're enjoying these videos, please like and subscribe and share them. And also, please check out all the content that we're putting up at Israel 365's YouTube channel.